Hey YouTube, after my up close guitar prawn videos, someone suggested I dig out my SG. So here is my guitar. I suppose I've had it longer than any of these other ones. I reckon I bought this. I had this at when the bells went on the Millennium because we remember playing Hell's Bells when they were ringing on this guitar up in Lennoxtown, just up the road, up in Pal Michael's house. I seem to remember that night, me and Michael, for some reason, both hold. I think it was that whole thing about getting too drunk, so we kind of stayed sober, and I think we drove round to my house. I think I was still driving, so I wasn't drinking. I didn't think I started drinking till like 11 o'clock at night, figuring that you always remember at New Year it being 4 in the morning and you've been absolutely waiting for a taxi. And I think so. We ended up going and getting the drum kit from my house, and then we played for half an hour in front of. And I remember Graham fell into his Christmas tree that night. So this is I looked up I've actually managed to find the serial number on it, which I knew was there, but so at one point I dropped this and the headstock kind of came off it, and I got it clamped, and my pal spray painted it so you couldn't see it as well, and he spray painted over the digits, but you can just make them out if the light hits off them right, and it comes in at 1995. This guitar, so this had a very hard life before I got it, considering it was only 4 or 5 years old. Wow, was it abused. Pretty much all the damages on it was from then, and even though I used it extensively as my only guitar, or my main guitar, for years, really, until I got the Schecter Telly. I didn't have this was my guitar. I did have my Epiphone one the whole time, and an acoustic, but this was my guitar. So I think it might have changed colour. I remember it being redder than this, or maybe I'm just used to that. But it's actually Ferrari red. It's got an ebony fingerboard. Look at the way the headstock has reacted like that. It was never like that. It was just a plain black headstock. And then about 2 years ago or something, I dug it out of the attic over at this house, and it was like, oh, what's happened to the headstock? So it did that, and it's in a gig bag in the attic, so I don't know whether it's been temperature or something. The paint, the lacquer was always scraping off the back of the neck when I got it. So I don't know whether maybe they didn't do a very good job of painting this guitar when it was new. That's what I mean. At the time, it was the cheapest SG I'd ever seen, and it wasn't really. And I think I paid. Well, I know I paid $350 for it in Victor Morris, or the Guitar Store, which was owned by Victor Morris in Glasgow. And I saw it, and remember, you used to get this dates it. Remember Scottish Supermart, which was a buy and sell paper. I think it was 50p or 70p, and it was like, this is before you had internet, basically, and that's how you bought and sold things. There would be like a guitar section, so you'd buy this what looked like a large scale newspaper, but it was literally, I had, I don't know, half a page of musical instruments. I also did boats and cars and houses, and you could basically buy and sell anything in it. I assume it's long gone. I do remember it did have a website for a while, but no, I think by this point Gumtree and that had just taken over. There was nothing left of it, so it's gone. But Victor Morris, that used to put adverts out on the Wednesday when I used to buy the paper, and it would tell you what was coming up at the weekend for sale that was new, and Gibson SG 350. Oh, a real Gibson SG. I always wanted one of them. Because I had the Epiphone one, so I wanted the Gibson one. And I remember going into the shop, and I was up here, and I'm looking, I got a Gibson SG. Oh, that's up there. Can I see the Gibson SG? And the guy's like that. Oh, are you going to buy it? And it was like, what? Are you going to buy it? I need to go and get the ladder to get it down. And it's like, well, I'm not going to buy it if you don't let me play it. What an arsehole, really. That's also where I found the Softtech. It's like Valve amp, 50 quid. Valve amp, I've seen that before. I didn't even know what valves were. This amp I'd seen. Used to be a guitar shop called Mr. Music, which was on the other side of the Clyde. Actually, only a couple hundred yards walk, but it was that was in there the whole for years, and I kept seeing it. And the reason I always thought it looked really cool. I put the snake skin on it, by the way. I always thought it was really cool, but I never bought it because it didn't have distortion. Yep, you know, it's just got master and preamp. It doesn't say distortion. I wanted an amp with distortion on it, not realising that it's the most distortion-y beast ever. So that was Victor Morris, which is where I bought most of my guitars. It was like the guy that ran it was an absolute prick. I reckon there's maybe 3 or 4 guitars that I didn't buy just because I didn't want to give that guy money. He was such a smarmy git. He was like, it's him that sold me my first Epiphone SG, and I remember going in and I was like, but yeah, I'm looking for a guitar, blah blah blah. I've got 250 quid or whatever it was. Looking at the SG, and he's like, no, you shouldn't buy that. You want to buy this? And he was trying to sell me an Ibanez Ghost Dance, which was a very nice guitar. It was 500 quid. I didn't have 500 quid, so I was like, yeah, well, okay, it's very nice. It had a really thick neck. I have seen one since then, and more of a, kind of looked a bit like an RG or something like that, but very much played like a jazz guitar. It had like a really thick neck and a really huge neck join, and it was very heavy and chunky, but it had a kind of sort of look a bit similar to that, apart from it was symmetrical. So I went in and get the guys that tried to sell me this Ghost Dance, and it's like, yeah, right now, give me a shot of the Epiphone on it anyway. So I had a shot of the two of them, and then I was so enraged at this guy being such a dick that I went to all the other guitar shops. But the difference was they had the Epiphone SG at 215 quid, and the other ones were all 240. So I went back, right, I'd like to buy the guitar. The Epiphone is the shit one. But yeah. Yeah, give me that. I was like, you got a gig bag with it? I was like, no, but we can do you a case for £90 or £80. And it was like, if I'd had £300 to spend on a guitar, I'd probably bought a £300 guitar, not a £200 one. So basically I got it home in a bin bag, you know, like the ultimate humiliation. I mean, folk like that should just be lined up and beaten up, basically. I don't know why he was working there. But I really did have issue with that guy. He's on my list of enemies, and in my list of enemies there's like 2 people on it. Just never liked him. Some people you just don't get on with. Thing was, he used to always wear a Babylon 5 t-shirt at the time. Babylon 5's excellent. I loved it. And I was just like, what a dick. Anyway, that's a bit by the by. So, yes, I've got a Gibson SG. I suppose it counts for something. I've never really bought another one. I did end up buying one that was a very, very good price a couple of years ago, the one that I swapped from Orange Amp. And it was nice as well at 24 frets, so this is only at 22. There really is no excuse for this not having 24 frets. Although I do know that Tony Iommi asked for a Gibson SG with 24 frets, and Gibson said it wasn't possible. You couldn't put 24 frets on an SG. And he was like, why? You just can't do it. Don't ask. So that's why Tony Iommi didn't use Gibson SGs after that. He got John Birch to build him one, because obviously go like, I really wanted an SG with 24 frets, but he said it wasn't possible, and John Birch has gone, why? There's even room for 2 extra frets. It's like why? It seems completely stupid not having 24, to be honest, because I mean, it's the argument there is like, see where a Les Paul pickup sits. A Les Paul neck pickup sits right up against the edge of the fingerboard, so that's the correct placing for a Les Paul neck pickup, is tight against the fingerboard. On an SG, I'm assuming it's because it's a bit thin here to take the pickup, so there is a gap where there's enough room for 2 frets on all SGs. But I'll live without having 24 frets. Yep, so I've not done any mods to this at all, apart from, there was at one point I remember putting a metal cover on one of the pickups, the start of eBay. I don't think it made any difference. I took it back out again. And the knobs on these guitars are all, if you ever see one from this era, there's always, see the metal bit in the top that says tone or volume, at least one of the knobs is either smashed or it's missing the metal bit on the top, guaranteed. And the reason they're smashed is because you can't actually take them off because they're epoxied on. So when you do try and take them off, that's why there's always chunks out of the knobs on them. You'll see ones from this era like that all the time, because as soon as you try and prise it off with a screwdriver or something, it just goes brittle and smashes. So basically I was like, right, sod it. So I went to eBay and bought like a $5 for a set of just normal, of just copied knobs and then basically crushed the ones that were on it with a monkey wrench, like, and they turned to glass and just shattered. So it doesn't have the original thingies. Also, it never had the original pickup thing, and I remember Jimmy Moon charging me £8 for one that didn't even fit properly. It's like, that was kind of back in the day before I learned how to do all this stuff myself. I also played this needing a truss rod adjustment for years, because the action was high. It sounded marvellous because it's got these pickups in it, but the action was high. It didn't play in like as well as my Epiphone one, but it sounded better. And it's got a Gibson Deluxe tuners on it. The snot-nosed ones, which are made in Germany, because I took one of them off just to see. So it's made in Germany on the back of it. So Schollers, I would imagine, is what they are. Even though they say Klossen Deluxe. No, they just say Gibson Deluxe. Are Klossen German as well? Don't know, whatever they are. But I always liked the neck pickup in this guitar. I think it was partly because the band I was in, G-Rock Peg, had a Telecaster and used to run the bridge pickup at full bung all the time. So for me, having the neck pickup meant you could hear me as well, because you're not going to compete with a Telecaster for spikiness and treble. So I was more that sound. So, I mean, if you go back to a certain time, like when I bought this guitar, it was common for people to buy, they would buy a beginner guitar, you know, like an Encore or a Jim Deacon or a something like that, to see if they would play the guitar properly. Then a year later, once they were still playing, you would buy a real guitar, an Epiphone SG, which I did. And then once you've been playing for a couple of years and you started thinking you want to be in a band, you need to get a real guitar. This was mine. So I think if this had been 20 years previously, I would just have had one guitar. It was very common for people to have one real guitar, and then, you know, they would maybe have like a 12 stringer, or, you know, some like a cheapy one that they bought later on as a sort of backup or for a specific project, or just to try out a Telecaster or something like that. But you'd have your main guitar, you'd make your choice and you'd stick with it. Mine was the red SG. The white one I would have liked. The black one I wouldn't have liked. To be honest with you, it's like going back, and it's like a lot of people now are very into, I know a few folk are right into, you know, it's like, oh, this is the guitar that Eric Clapton had. This is the one that's like Peter Green's. This is the one that looks like Tony Iommi. You know, it's like a lot of people are very into that. Oh, I've got to have that. The Stevie Ray Vaughan Strat's got to have that. It's got to have the left-handed bridge. Because I'm such a fan of Stevie Ray Vaughan, I need to have that. I never really got that. I did kind of want mine to be, I did want the cherry red one, but they were more expensive. And it wasn't a case of you never found SGs. I still think you're pretty lucky to find one for under £400 anyway. Especially like a slightly fancier one with the ebony fingerboard. But I mean, I'm sitting playing it going, should I be putting coil splits in this? Because obviously I can do it now. I can take these pickups to bits, add the extra wire, put a push-pull pot in and have a dual coil split, get single coil sounds. But I just don't know. There's something about having a guitar the way it was intended. Okay, this isn't an original 60s SG. This is it's a 90s one, but it's still an SG. It says SG on it, in case you didn't know. Which stands for solid guitar, which I thought was really disappointing. I was hoping it was something a bit like Gran Turismo or something, you know, it had like another meaning, but no, SG, solid guitar. So I'm kind of keeping it as it is just now, just for, I don't know. Not that it really, it's not going to detract from the value or anything like that, having a push-pull pot, because you can just ignore it. But I'm glad I never got rid of the pickups or anything like that. It has survived the modding process for me because it was too expensive a guitar to ever get painted or bits chopped up or extra pickups added or any of that nonsense. The number of guitars I tried out since, and to be honest, I've never played an SG better than this one. I've played ones that are worth a lot more money, very expensive ones, but ultimately they kind of felt either, you know, exactly the same as this or 99.9% exactly the same as this. It's just on the slightly better side. But I always like this one, although the neck has always had its issues with the lacquer coming off, and it's been sort of spray painted by my pal and all that. Which is really be using this for. But I mean, I always say it's like I needed to have an SG because of Sabbath. I didn't need to have an SG because of Sabbath. I just thought this was the coolest looking guitar. I thought it almost kind of looked. It's so much cooler and evil looking than any of the other guitars, any of the bands I was into at the time, you know, like Strats and Tellys, or Strat for me was a Hank Marvin thing, a Telly. I wasn't really aware of Telecasters. I always thought they looked a bit like not like an incomplete version of the Strat. That was what I always thought a Telly was. And I didn't like Les Pauls because my pal Robert had after he'd been playing for a year, he bought a gold top Epiphone Les Paul. I think it was like 400 quid or something. I always thought it was crap. And then the SG came out, and 6 months later it was my turn. I'd been playing for a year, so I needed to get an Epiphone, and it was an SG for me because Angus Young, Pete Townsend, Robbie Krieger, Tony Iommi, all that stuff. I didn't want a specific one. I just thought they looked cool, and they seemed to keep peering up. All my favourite bands the SG seemed to be the one, so it was the one. It still might be my favourite looking guitar. I do like, a lot of people don't like the big scratch plate. I do. I think it's cool. I think it might be the best looking guitar, possibly, of the main makes. Certainly, well, I don't know. See, I do like Telecasters now as well. You kind of grow into these things. I think maybe one of my problems is because I've never had any other. This was just the SG. I wanted the SG. That's it. I didn't really have any, even though I was looking at Tellys and Strats and Explorers and all these other wonderful guitars I've got. I never really wanted another SG because I've got one, and I've got the one that I wanted. You know, it's like, okay, you can get a better one. Well, arguably, is a standard actually better than this? It's like what I was told, which there's probably a grain of truth in it. The SGs were cut out, the bodies were cut out, and the ones that had shitty looking grain, like maybe a dark bit or something like that. I don't know whether it's made of one piece of wood. It's probably a couple. So it's like the ones that didn't really want the opaque the see-through finish. Just basically, it was like the nicer ones went, oh, that's a lovely one. That becomes a standard. Yeah. We'll coat that in red plastic or black plastic or white plastic and make that a special. So it's at that point, the guitars were exactly the same at that point. So what this got was the neck was attached to it. It doesn't have binding on it, and it doesn't have the fancy inlays. And the pickups don't have covers. But apart from that, this is exactly the same as the standard from that era, from 95. Because although it's hard to believe, the Gibson catalogue did not have 5,000 guitars in it in 1995. It had some. I think that there was a Les Paul Studio available in a couple of colours, a Les Paul Standard available in a couple of colours, SG Special being the cheaper one, red, white, black, SG Standard, black, or cherry, and that was kind of the Gibson catalogue. I think they occasionally maybe had a Thunderbird or a Firebird or something that they kind of occasionally put in, but really we're talking about like a bulk run of half a dozen models of guitar, including all the colour variants, which is mental now, because I mean, obviously you go into... Oh, those are the ones you saw. Maybe they always did the expensive ones. I mean, it's just, you know, it just seems to be such a large discrepancy. Just seems to be so many guitars they make these days. This is back in the day, but it's just a standard SG. This is not a standard, it's a studio SG. And I don't know why the SG was called a special for the cheap one, and the Les Paul was called the studio. Don't really know. All the Les Paul studios from this era seem to be that wine colour, dark cherry red with gold hardware seemed to be the one colour you could get. Although I have seen one in this colour, and it was like one of my Trade Tuesday things. My plan was to get myself a Gibson Les Paul, and I really ideally wanted the red, the ebony one with the ebony fingerboard with the Ferrari red, because it's quite unusual to see a red Les Paul as well. The same as it's actually become quite unusual to see a red SG. There was an Epiphone G310 which looked like this, but you see 1,000 of those for every one of the actual Gibson ones. Just not brilliantly popular. But it's mine. And I used to play... I treated myself to where I could play War Pigs acceptably. I was going to buy myself one. I really do have too many guitars. It's disgusting that I've got ones like this that I keep locked up, don't even play, because I don't find this as interesting as a lot of the Japanese ones. And it's like, build quality wise, it's a Gibson, so it sounds great. The frets I've done several times over the years. It doesn't feel... I always thought when I bought this, compared to my Epiphone Samick one, it's nothing like as refined as the Epiphone. The Epiphone's a much prettier thing to look at. Everything's just more accurate and nicer. But this has the big pickups in it, and it's also got the name on the headstock, which is vitally important. I do understand. I know, you know, I stand here and I slag off Gibsons and vendors all the time, thinking you can get better guitars from Japan. They are better guitars, but it does make it worth 3 times as much saying Gibson on the headstock, even if everything else was exactly the same. A badge of honour or whatever you would call it, which doesn't really appeal to me now. I don't know if I really can't believe the difference that polishing the frets on this thing made as well. Also, that this one has been cursed with having Elixir strings on it probably for the last 10 years. And because the strings weren't actually rusty and making me bleed, I would play it and just leave the Elixir strings on it. But it really did need new strings, and it really did need the fretboard getting cleaned up. And I can't believe how well it came out just with a wipe. Very pretty guitar. So I don't know, if I ever actually manage to get this band started, maybe I'll start using it again. SGs are funny guitars. I'm very aware of it being an SG much more now than I was before, because it used to just be my good guitar. And then as I'm progressing on, I've got like a very stratty Strat, I've got a very telly, and it's like all these things are a bit more of the differences in them rather than it just being, it's just got humbuckers. This is an SG and it's got its own slight sonic differences to other types of guitar, just inherent in the shape and the mass. It's not actually as light as I thought it was. I thought it was going to be when I picked it up. I'm going to guess it's under 4 kilograms, but I don't think that much. Maybe 3.8 or something like that. This is where I guess and I'm completely wrong as usual. What's that? It's actually quite light, 3.4. So that's on the lighter side. I normally think 3.5, 3.6 is average for a guitar, so it's actually lighter. It's not as light as that 50s tribute one I had though. Was it a 50s tribute? A 60s tribute? Whatever one that was I had before, the one that I traded in for the orange amp. It weighed nothing, it was like 2.9 or something, less than 3 kilograms. So maybe the ebony's heavier, maybe the plastic coating made a difference. Don't know. But yeah, no, it's arguably it comes down to which one is what kind of guitar do you play, and I suppose, although you very rarely see me play it, I suppose this is my guitar. There's something very familiar about it, you know, since I've had it for 25 years. It feels very the same as it always felt. Kind of dependable. And one of the things I was actually thinking about the Shocking Bird when I built it. Didn't really think about that until when I dug this out the other day. It's got exactly the same neck profile on it. It's a fresher neck, and it's exactly this profile. And also I painted the neck red as well on it. I think at the time, just because it was red paint that I had. But it's kind of, the Shocking Bird kind of lives on in this guitar. I didn't really realise that's what I'd done at the time. But I think that's why I found it so incredibly comfortable immediately. I'm just used to it. Back in the days when I'm now used to playing any guitar, I'm alright after 2 minutes. It's the same as, like, you know, if you drive cars for a living. You know, say you work in a car showroom and you've got to take test runs out on all the different types of cars. Once you're used to driving lots of cars, it's fine. You know, you get in a car and you go, oh, clutch is a wee bit stiffer on this one. You know, it's like the accelerator's a wee bit to the right, the indicator's now on the right hand side of the steering wheel. That sort of thing, you just get used to. So basically, any car I drive now, it's the same thing. I drive it. Once I've done a couple of corners, I'm fine. I'm used to everything being a bit different. Oh, the steering's a little bit different. It's the same thing with guitars, where it's like, even if you give me like a really bizarre one no one's ever played before, I can adapt to it really quickly. Whereas back in the days of this was the only guitar I had, so this is what I was used to, so this is all I knew. I used to find Strats unplayable. I didn't like Telecasters until I bought my Schecter one. Because it made sense, none of the other ones did. Now they all do, but I'm used to it. And to be honest, even when I bought this, AC/DC were a big band for me, but they weren't as popular as they are now. AC/DC back then. I do remember seeing the Donington thing. That was what got me into AC/DC. My pal Martin Gorman used to play Highway to Hell in the acoustic, and I fucking loved that, but I didn't like any of the records I'd heard. It wasn't until I saw that Donington Thunderstruck, and it was just like fucking life-changing event for me. But I always thought the SG looked weird. Not so much this one, but the other one, the Epiphone one, always looked dead small on me, because again, we're going back to the time when, see, I wanted to see what a Gibson SG looked like. You just type it into Google, there's hundreds of them everywhere. I didn't know what an SG, I actually bought Black Sabbath Volume 4. I had this out the other day, actually. Is that it there? No, what did I do with it? I actually bought the expensive version of Black Sabbath Volume 4 because it had a picture of Tony Iommi's SG inside it. Because the only time I saw an SG ever was on AC/DC album covers. I didn't buy guitar magazines because it was like £5-6 for a guitar magazine, and for that I could buy 2 or 3 albums. So I just bought 2 or 3 albums. I've only ever bought like 3 or 4 guitar magazines in my life. So just things like pictures of this. I used to buy records because of the guitar that was on the cover. You know, it was only £1. It was like, I've got like a, you know, what was the one that's got an is that a Cream one? A Cream record that's got Jack Bruce playing his EBO, and it was like, I bought that just because of the cover, so I could actually see what an SG looked like. All these things you forget about, you know, kids these days, and there was no such thing as reviews or anything like that, and there was no such thing if I had no concept of them being different. You know, it's like, as far as I was concerned, yep, this is a guitar Tony Iommi plays, one of these must be good, and it's like, well, his is actually a 60s SG special with P90s in it, so it's probably not really that. It's the same outline, made by the same company, but no, that's similar. I think this one's got much more powerful pickups than what you would normally expect. These are not your vintage voiced ones. These are a bit more bah, which I've just come to accept that that's a good sound. I will say that the difference between this one, even though the truss rod needed adjusted and you need to buy a special spanner to do it, so the action was high, it sounded eons better than my Epiphone one because it still had the original pickups in it. Eventually I put better pickups in it and it made such a difference. It actually made it probably a better guitar than this, but it says Epiphone on it. Still got that as well. Should probably look that out. A lot of it's just to do with what you think. There you go, half an hour talking about it and hardly even played it. Rock on. Catch you later. I'll do an up close thing and I was playing it in the live stream. I'll play something on it at some point. Rock on, like and subscribe if you could. That would be super awesome. Catch you later.